Hi everyone, welcome back to our channel. Bex here today to share some books that I've been acquiring over the past few months. I have 9 to share and the majority of them are nonfiction, which is pretty fitting because this is being uploaded during Nonfiction November. So if you'd like to see what I've been gathering over the last little bit, stick around. The first 4 books are actually ones that I'm technically borrowing from my sister when I was visiting my family in August this year. One of the things I did when I was home was help my sister prepare for her move to New York City because she was going to grad school, and she has some books on her shelves that I was interested in. They're on my want to read list on Goodreads, so she invited me to take some back with me, and when I eventually read them, I will give them back to her. So these aren't, officially in my book collection, but they'll probably be on my shelves for a little bit. The first book is actually one that I did give her a couple years ago. I think it was for Christmas, might have been for her birthday, I can't remember exactly, but it is The Collected Schizophrenias by Esme Weijin Wang. This is a book of essays that documents Esme's experience being diagnosed with schizophrenia and also just dealing with having that mental illness on a day-to-day basis. This has been widely talked about on BookTube. It's the winner of the Graywolf Press Nonfiction Prize. I'm definitely excited to read this. I mean, I picked it out for my sister because I thought she would like it, but also because I knew at some point I would be able to borrow it from her if I wanted to, and that time has finally come. The second book that I grabbed from her is Dopesick: Dealers, Doctors, and the Drug Company That Addicted America by Beth Macy. This is a piece of investigative journalism in which Beth, who has lived in Virginia for many years, starts speaking to people in her community about opioid addiction. Both people who are addicted to opioids, their family members, and also the first responders who deal with people when they overdose. And she also digs into the Sackler family and how they have caused a lot of the problems that exist now with the opioid epidemic. This has been made into a TV show that this year, I believe, that was released at least on Hulu in the States. I'm not sure if it's come to Canada yet because we don't have Hulu here, but it would be interesting to read this book and then watch that show. I'm not sure how much of an exact copy it is from this. It might be more of an adaptation because this is a pretty big book, so I imagine they've taken certain storylines from here and sort of put them into the TV show, but this is going to be a really sad book because, I mean, even at the beginning of it, there is a page that talks about who it's in memory of, and it's a list of a bunch of names of people that have passed away, so probably all people that were affected by the opioid epidemic. So it's going to be a tough read, but even just flipping through it, it looks really, really good. This one is the first fiction book to appear in this pile, and it is The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Turton. Some of these books my sister has not read. I don't think she's read Dopesick or The Collected Schizophrenias, but she has read this one already, and she said that it took her a little bit to kind of get into, and you really had to pay attention when you were reading it, but it was worth it in the end. And I've heard a lot of things about this on BookTube. It's a very popular book, so if you're not aware, the plot line is that there is this person that wakes up in a different body every day, but it's always in the same location in this manor house, and this character has to figure out who murders Evelyn Hardcastle each night, and if they don't, they have to kind of relive the day, but just in another character's body, so you get those different points of views to try and figure out the whodunit. I've heard mixed reviews on this. Some people really love it, and other people have definitely felt that it was overhyped. However, I'm still curious to check it out. I really like the idea of that plot and the fact that the only way that this character can get out is if they solve the murder, so I really want to see how this turns out. The final book that I'm borrowing from my sister is another intense one, and that is The New Jim Crow: Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindness by Michelle Alexander. This book has been out since 2010. She has the 10th anniversary edition, so there is a foreword in this book that's written 10 years later with Michelle Alexander reflecting on how things haven't really changed, I imagine, since she originally wrote this. This is one that, with the murder of George Floyd, I feel like a lot more people have been making an effort to read books that talk about things like this. So I've been seeing it a lot more since then. It was on my radar before then, but that was definitely a push to kind of make this more of a priority to try and get my hands on it. This is going to go into a lot of detail. It seems to be a bit more academic than some of the nonfiction books that I read, but it's going to talk about how the criminal justice system works as sort of the new Jim Crow to control people of color and particularly Black men. I know I'm going to be very angry reading this book, but it's something that I'll learn a lot from as well. Next is another book that technically came from my sister, but she wanted to get rid of it, so now it's officially mine, and that is Better by Atul Gawande. The subtitle of this says A Surgeon's Notes on Performance. You may recognize Atul Gawande's name because a few years ago he published Being Mortal, which is one of my favorite nonfiction books I've ever read. He is a surgeon, but he also writes medical nonfiction. This is one of his earlier books that came out before Being Mortal, and this just talks about failure, but failure in the context of a doctor and how that can mean the difference between life and death sometimes, and how you are always striving in the medical field to do better. I'm very curious to see what he talks about in here. It seems like he's going to be bringing in different cases or different examples and sort of using those to talk about being better. And when I read the first few pages, because I wanted to make sure it was something that I was really interested in, I was already getting sucked into the story that he was telling. So I feel like I'm realizing at this point that medical nonfiction is a specific subgenre that I'm really interested in. So this, I imagine, will be a very good read for me. The last 4 books that I have to talk about, I got from different thrift stores over the past few months, both Goodwill and Value Village. The first book is actually one I have read, but I don't own a copy of, and that is Night by Elie Wiesel. This is one that I'm sure many of you will be familiar with. There's probably a bunch of you that read this book in school, which is how I read it back when I was a sophomore in high school. There was sort of a guided reading thing that was happening, and it wasn't like everybody had to read this book, but it was sort of suggested to us at the point in the year where we were touching on World War II that if you're interested, we have copies of this book, you can borrow it and read it. And that's what I did. We used to have time every week to read in our, it was a combined English social studies course called The American Experience, and so we would go through American history, and at the point of World War II, when we had that free reading time, I was reading this book, and I remember sitting at the table reading certain parts of this book because they were so intense, and I was sitting there wondering, like, does anybody realize what I'm reading about right now? Like, there's some gruesome stuff in here, because if you're not aware, Elie Wiesel and his family were taken from their home and they were sent to Auschwitz and then Buchenwald because his family is Jewish, and he's talking about his time in these concentration camps and what happened to him and his family. So it's very intense. It's a very tiny book, but it's very impactful, and it's something that I would really like to read again because it has been so long. And also this edition looks brand new, so I couldn't say no when I saw this at Value Village. Next in this pile is another nonfiction, and it is The Inconvenient Indian, A Curious Account of Native People in North America by Thomas King. This is one that I have seen on BookTube a bit, but not too much. It's a book that documents the history of Indigenous people in the US and Canada, and it kind of puts a darker, humorous spin on it. At least that's the impression that I'm getting from the little bit that I read when I was flipping through it in Goodwill trying to decide if I wanted to get it. This is going to look at some things in history that I might have been told a certain perspective from, and then I feel like Thomas King is going to sort of reiterate it from the Indigenous perspective, but also adding in that little bit of humor. This is CanLit, Canadian Literature. The author Thomas King was actually born in the States but has lived in Canada for a long time, and at least at the time of publication of this book, he lived in Guelph, Ontario, which is pretty cool because I went to the University of Guelph, so there's a tie in there that I didn't even realize until I picked up this book. The final 2 books in this pile are both fiction, the first of which is Leave the World Behind by Rumaan Alam. This is one that I've definitely been hearing about exclusively on BookTube. This is a BookTube made me buy it example. This is about a family that decides to rent a house in the countryside, like an Airbnb style, and it's a family of 4, the parents, and they have 2 teenage children. And while they're out enjoying their vacation for a week, they get a knock on the door one night, and it's a couple claiming that they are the owners of this Airbnb, and they've left New York City, escaped it because something's going on. There's no power, there's no cell phone service, and this family has to sort of figure out if these people are telling the truth, what's actually going on here. As far as I understand, there's also some power dynamics regarding race and class involved with this, so could be pretty intense. I have heard that this book does not have a particularly satisfying ending, but I'm still intrigued by it, and the fact that I found it for $3 at Goodwill, I mean, in that case, for me, it was worth the chance. The final book in this pile is Washington Black by Essie Adugian. I feel like I've been hearing about this book on and off for a few years. People keep picking it up every so often just because it got so much hype. It won the Scotiabank Giller Prize. This is another CanLit book, and this edition looks brand new. It doesn't even look like the person read it, and so I had to pick it up, even though I'm a little hesitant about whether or not it'll really be the kind of book for me. From what I understand, Washington Black is born as a slave in Barbados, and his slave owner's brother comes and chooses Washington Black to be his manservant, and the two of them end up going on all of these adventures together. They start to really form this relationship, this bond. At some point, a bounty is placed on Washington's head because he's accused of killing a man, and that really tests the relationship that these two people have been forming. Once again, I've heard some mixed reviews on this, but generally on the more positive side. I don't think this will be a book that I'll just randomly pick up. I think I've really got to be in the mood for it, but hopefully I enjoy it when the time comes. Those are all the books that I have been acquiring over the past few months. If you've read any of them, please let me know what you thought. Is there a book from this bunch that you think I should read first? Definitely recommend them in the comments below. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you later.